My name is Landon Pierce, I'm 28 years old, and I live in Boston, Massachusetts, or at least, that's where the version of me my family recognizes exists. For 23 years, I've been the disappointment. The one who never measured up. The one my parents whispered about when they thought I couldn't hear. My older brother Grant, the family's golden boy, had always been the son, bright, flawless, untouchable. And me? I was the shadow everyone stepped over on their way to admire him. That morning, sitting in the Harvard auditorium, I watched my father stand before hundreds of guests, ready to announce that my brother, perfect, polished Grant Pierce, would inherit our family's $75 million logistics empire, a collection of 12 luxury cars, and the mansion in Manhattan where we grew up pretending to be perfect. And I sat alone in the back row, the only one clapping out of obligation. Before I tell you my complete story, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story travels. My family's name is engraved on buildings, scholarships, and yachts. The Pierce family, old money polished to look like new. We own Pierce Freight and Shipping, a company my father claimed he built from nothing, though nothing included millions from his father's trust fund. My father, Sterling Pierce, is 55. Salt and pepper hair, perfect suits, and a heart cold enough to keep champagne chilled. He's the kind of man who could tell you every ship in his fleet but couldn't tell you his own son's middle name. My mother, Vivian, is 52, elegant, ruthless, and obsessed with image. She calls charity galas battles and gossip strategy. When people asked about me at events, she'd smile her diamond smile and say, "Oh, that's our other son, Landon," like she was explaining a tax deduction. Then there's Grant, 2 years older, Harvard MBA, trust fund prodigy. The poster boy for every success my parents could claim as their own. His life was a highlight reel of achievements, all perfectly documented on the family wall, trophies, degrees, photo ops with senators and CEOs. And mine? A corner with a participation ribbon from Little League. But being ignored teaches you something powerful, how to observe. I noticed the cracks my family pretended weren't there. The way my mother's smile faltered when father touched her hand. The way father's jaw clenched whenever anyone mentioned family resemblance. Even Grant's arrogance had tremors beneath it, the kind that come from knowing you're built on borrowed pride. That day at Harvard wasn't just my brother's graduation, it was his coronation. Burgundy banners hung from marble archways. The brass band played songs that reeked of old money. I pulled up in my 2015 Ford F-150, the same one with a dented bumper and a radio that only caught AM stations. I parked it between a Lamborghini and a Bentley, both belonging to students who probably hadn't even turned 21. My suit was the same one I wore to every family event, navy, off the rack, and already tight around the shoulders. My father's cufflinks alone cost more than my car. The usher checked my ticket twice before leading me to the last row. "Back there, Mr. Pierce." Translation, where you won't ruin the family photo. My parents sat in the front row, Vivian's pearl necklace gleaming under the stage lights, Sterling's Rolex catching the flash of every camera. As the speeches began, I stared at the polished hardwood stage where my family's legacy was being handed over like a trophy. Grant stood tall, beaming, surrounded by admiration. And me? I sat behind strangers, clapping for a brother who'd never once looked back to see if I was in the crowd. But even as bitterness clawed at me, a small part of me, foolish, hopeful, waited for something. Maybe a nod. Maybe a moment where they'd finally see me. Then, right as the dean introduced my brother, the air shifted. I felt it before I saw her, a woman moving through the crowd with quiet authority, her eyes fixed on me. She wore a navy dress, tailored and sharp. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. She didn't look like anyone from my family circle, she looked like someone who belonged everywhere else but here. She stopped at my row, leaned down, and handed me a manila folder, heavy, sealed, important. Her perfume was faintly floral, her accent unplaceable, maybe Spanish, maybe Italian. "Landon Pierce?" she asked. "Yes," I replied, my heart pounding. She met my eyes. "Your mother's been lying to you for 23 years. They don't know who your real father is." My world tilted. "What?" She cut me off, whispering, "Open it when you're alone. Your real inheritance isn't here in this room. It's waiting for you in Miami." Then she turned and disappeared through the crowd, silent, efficient, like a shadow vanishing under the stage lights. I looked down at the folder in my hand. It felt heavier than any diploma in that auditorium. And I knew, without even opening it, that my life was about to split clean in half. By the time the ceremony ended, I couldn't hear the applause anymore, just the pounding in my ears. The folder burned in my hand like it was alive. Grant was surrounded by cameras, laughter, champagne glasses clinking. My father was shaking hands with board members, my mother glowing under chandeliers that looked like they were made to reflect her vanity. And me? I slipped out of the ballroom, unnoticed as always. The valet looked confused when I tossed him a ticket for a scratched Ford pickup parked between a Lamborghini and a McLaren. "That yours, sir?" he asked hesitantly. "Unfortunately, yeah," I said, sliding him a tip that made him smirk, the kind of smirk you give someone who doesn't belong. The air outside was cold and sharp. Harvard's Grand Hall stood behind me, glowing like a temple of privilege. I sat in my truck, locked the doors, and turned on the dome light. It flickered twice before holding steady. I opened the folder. The first document was a DNA test, dated 2001. My hands went cold. I skimmed the page, once, twice, 3 times, before I finally processed the words. Probability of paternity between Sterling Pierce and Landon Pierce, 0%. 0. Not 99.9% confirmed. Not inconclusive. 0. The man who'd spent his life calling me worthless wasn't even my father. The next page made my throat tighten. A photograph, faded, slightly sun-damaged, of my mother, decades younger, standing on Miami Beach beside a tall, tan man with dark hair and the same brown eyes that stared back at me in the mirror. He had his arm around her waist. She was smiling, not the cold, camera-ready smile she wore at galas, but something real, something alive. On the back, written in blue ink, Vivian and Raphael, Miami Beach, 2000. I flipped to the next page, a legal document from Miami-Dade County Probate Court. My heart stopped. Last will and testament of Rafael Castellano, founder of Castellano Marine Holdings. The highlighted section read, "To my biological son, Landon, whom I was never allowed to meet but have watched from afar, I leave my entire estate, including Castellano International Holdings, all properties, and personal assets totaling approximately $400 million. I froze. 400 million. The words didn't even feel real. But the next page made my hands tremble. A letter, written in my mother's handwriting, the same looping, perfect script that had signed every cold birthday card I'd ever received. Raphael, Sterling can never know about that night. He's sterile after his college accident, though he doesn't know it yet. I'm pregnant with your child, but this baby will be raised as a Pierce. The Pierce name opens doors your money never could. Don't contact me again." The edges of the paper were wrinkled, tear-stained, maybe from him, maybe from her, maybe both. And suddenly, everything made sense. Every sneer. Every cutting remark. Every time my father's voice hardened when I tried to speak. Sterling must have known, deep down. Maybe not consciously, but something in him felt it. That I didn't belong. That I wasn't his. And my mother? She'd known all along, and chosen silence. My entire life had been a cover-up. I leaned back in the seat, staring at the dashboard while my breath fogged the windshield. My pulse was a hammer in my chest. My phone buzzed, a call from Mother. I stared at the name flashing on the screen before answering. "Where are you?" she demanded, her voice clipped, impatient. "Your father's about to give his second toast. You can't just disappear like a child." "He's not my father," I interrupted quietly. Silence. Then a brittle laugh. "Don't be ridiculous, Landon. What kind of nonsense?" "Miami Beach, 2000, I said, my voice steady. "Rafael Castellano. Ring any bells?" For a second, she didn't breathe. Then the line went dead. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark window, the eyes, the jawline, the same build as the man in the photograph. The stranger who'd given me everything I never knew I had. The man who was my real father. The next morning, I walked into work at the Pierce shipping warehouse in Newark, where I'd spent the past 6 years managing shifts, loading cargo, fixing forklifts, and earning the kind of calluses you can't hide. The guys on the floor nodded as I passed. They didn't care about names or degrees. They cared about who showed up, and I always did. "Rough night, boss?" Eddie, one of the forklift operators, asked. I gave him a tired grin. "You have no idea." He laughed. "Family stuff?" "Yeah," I said softly. "Something like that." By noon, I'd already made up my mind. I clocked out early, grabbed my jacket, and headed straight to Logan Airport. The woman's words from Harvard replayed in my head. "Your real inheritance isn't here. It's waiting for you in Miami." The ticket agent looked up as I approached. "Destination?" "Miami," I said, sliding my ID across the counter. "One way or round trip?" "One way." She hesitated. "Any bags to check?" I shook my head. "No. I'm leaving everything behind." The flight was half empty. I took a window seat and stared at the clouds outside, wondering if the man who'd left me everything had ever flown this same route, looking out at the same sky. I didn't know what I'd find when I landed. I didn't even know if it would be real. But I knew one thing, I wasn't the forgotten son anymore. I was about to find out where I really came from. When the plane touched down in Miami, the air felt heavier, not just with humidity, but with history. I didn't book a hotel, didn't call anyone. I just took a cab straight from the airport to Castellano International Holdings, the name that had haunted my thoughts since I opened that folder. From the outside, the building looked like power made of glass, 40 floors of black steel and mirrored windows rising above the waterfront. The company logo gleamed across the front, a golden ship's wheel, encircled by the words Castellano International. It made Piers Shipping look like a lemonade stand. When I walked through the marble lobby, 2 security guards in tailored suits greeted me by name. "Mr. Castellano," one said. "We've been expecting you." I froze. "Expecting me?" He nodded toward the elevator. "Top floor. Ms. Nadira will meet you." The elevator ride felt endless. My reflection in the mirrored walls didn't even look like me anymore, same face, but the eyes were different. Determined. Focused. Ready. When the doors opened, she was waiting, the same woman from Harvard. Navy dress. Silver-streaked hair. Sharp, composed, and terrifyingly confident. "I'm your aunt," she said simply, extending her hand. "Nadira Castellano." The words hit me harder than I expected. Aunt. Family. For 28 years, I'd been a background character in my own bloodline. Now, I was standing face to face with someone who shared it. She gestured toward a massive window overlooking the port. Cargo ships stretched across Biscayne Bay, their movement slow and deliberate, a symphony of trade and power. "Your father built this empire," Nadira said. "He turned what was once a small coastal operation into the backbone of Latin American shipping." She pressed a button on the wall, and the window behind her flickered to life with digital displays, contracts, graphs, numbers that didn't even look real. 400 million in liquid assets, she continued. Billions in total holdings. Government contracts. Political influence in every port from New York to Rio de Janeiro. "This is your inheritance." I swallowed hard. "My inheritance?" She smiled faintly. "Your birthright. Everything Raphael built, he built for you." My knees felt weak. "Why didn't he ever contact me?" Her gaze softened. "Because your mother threatened to destroy him if he tried." She had leverage through Sterling, political, financial, and personal. But Raphael knew. He had his suspicions confirmed when you were 2. She reached into a folder and slid out a photo, me, barely a toddler, being carried out of a car by my mother. "Your father hired a private investigator. He obtained a DNA sample, a strand of your hair from a barber shop." My jaw tightened. "He knew I existed." "More than that," Nadira said. "He watched you grow up. Every year, every milestone. He couldn't be there, but he never stopped being your father." She turned to the wall again, tapping a few buttons. The screen changed to a collage of images, photographs from every stage of my life. There I was, loading crates in the Newark warehouse. Graduating high school, no one in the crowd cheering for me. Standing alone at the back of my brother's birthday party. Raphael had been watching. Always. I could barely speak. "Why?" "Because he wanted to make sure you became your own man," Nadira said. "He once told me, the son she stole from me will learn what it means to earn his place, and when he does, I'll give him the world." I pressed a hand over my face, trying to steady my breathing. "And Quentin?" I asked after a moment. "My brother, what about him?" Her eyes glimmered with something sharp. "Ah, the golden child. You should know, he's not Sterling's son either." My head shot up. "What?" "Vivian had an affair with Sterling's business partner, Harrison Vale, 2 years before you were born," Nadira said calmly, as though reading a headline. "Quentin is Harrison's son. That's why he was always favored. Your mother needed Sterling's wealth and Vale's charm to hold her social standing together." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "So neither of us are Sterling's sons?" "No," she said with a cool satisfaction. "But you, Landon, you're the only one who's truly blood to your father. And there's more." She pulled up another set of documents, contracts bearing both company logos, Piers Shipping and Castellano International. "These are your family's lifelines," she explained. 70% of Pierce's overseas shipments rely on our ports. 80% of their contracts are through Castellano subsidiaries. And here's the best part, every one of those contracts includes a clause. She zoomed in on the fine print. All partnership agreements are nullified if the Pierce family is ever managed by a non-biological heir. The realization hit like thunder. Quentin isn't a Pierce. If he takes over. Nadira nodded slowly. Then every contract collapses. Their company folds within 6 months. I leaned back, gripping the edge of the table. My family, the same people who called me worthless, had unknowingly built their empire on my father's foundation. Raphael was poetic that way, she said softly. He set the pieces years ago. All you had to do was find the truth. My phone buzzed violently in my pocket. I pulled it out, 12 missed calls from my mother, 8 from my father, and 10 texts from Grant. Mom, what did you do? Dad, you're ruining everything. Grant, please answer. They're losing their minds. I locked the screen and slipped it back into my pocket. Nadira handed me a Mont Blanc pen, sleek and heavy. Raphael's will makes you the CEO of Castellano International. If you sign here, it's official. I stared at the document. My name, Landon Raphael Castellano, was already printed at the bottom, waiting for me to claim it. I thought about my childhood, about every insult, every dismissal, every look of quiet disgust at the dinner table. They'd given me nothing but shame. Now, I had the power to take everything back. I signed my name, my hand steady, the ink sinking into paper like justice finally finding its mark. When I looked up, Nadira smiled faintly. Welcome home, Mr. Castellano. 3 weeks later, I stood in an office 40 stories above the Miami harbor, sunlight spilling through the glass like liquid gold. Below me, Castellano International ships glided in and out of port, massive, silent, unstoppable. The skyline shimmered. I'd seen this view in photos, in dreams I didn't even know I was having. Now it was mine. The door opened behind me. My assistant, yes, I had an assistant now, stepped in. Mr. Castellano, she said softly, your visitors have arrived. Send them in. They entered like ghosts of an old life, my mother and Sterling Pierce. They looked smaller than I remembered. Vivian's perfect posture sagged under the weight of sleepless nights. Her pearls didn't shine like they used to. Sterling's silver hair was thinner, his expensive suit wrinkled at the cuffs. This was not the commanding couple that ruled boardrooms and dinner parties. This was two people watching the empire they'd built on lies begin to crumble. Landon, Sterling started, his voice surprisingly frail. We need to talk about the contracts. I turned slowly from the window. Of course you do. He took a step forward. You have to understand, Whitmore Shipping. Pierce Shipping, I corrected. You changed the name when you married into money. But yes, continue. Sterling hesitated, his jaw tightening. Without those contracts, the company won't survive. We need your help. I almost laughed. Need my help. The words sounded foreign coming from his mouth. Vivian tried to speak next, her tone trembling between guilt and pride. Landon, please. We made mistakes, but we did what we thought was best. You have to understand. I cut her off. Best for who? You. The image? The name? You raised me to believe I was less than human because of something you did. She flinched. The Whitmore name meant opportunity, she said, voice cracking. It meant doors that would have stayed closed. I did what I had to do to protect you. Protect me? I stepped forward, every word sharp. You protected your reflection. You used me as a smudge you could hide behind pearls and private schools. The truth? You didn't protect me, you erased me. Sterling finally broke in, frustration flaring in his eyes. Enough. You can hate us all you want, but think about your brother. Quentin doesn't deserve to lose everything because of our mistakes. That stopped me. For a moment, the anger wavered. Quentin had always been the chosen one, the golden boy, but he'd never been cruel. Just blind. Privileged. Conditioned to believe the world revolved around him. I looked between them, feeling that strange mix of vengeance and clarity. You want to save your empire? I said. Fine. I'll make you a deal. They both straightened, hope flickering like desperate light. I'll keep the contracts, I continued. For 1 year. But there's a condition. What condition? Sterling asked cautiously. Quentin works in your warehouses. Real work. The same kind I did. He'll load trucks, manage shifts, deal with the people who keep your empire alive. No shortcuts, no assistants, no executive perks. 1 year. If he quits or you try to interfere, every contract ends immediately. Vivian stared at me in disbelief. You're joking. Does it look like I'm joking? You'd humiliate your own brother like that? She snapped. I smiled faintly. No. I'd teach him something you never taught me, what it means to earn something. Sterling rubbed his temples. He'll never last a month. Then you better hope, I said quietly, he inherited more from Harrison Vale than just his eyes. Vivian's face went pale. You know about Harrison? I know about everything, I said flatly. Raphael made sure of that. He believed in truth, something you two wouldn't recognize if it bought you another yacht. Silence hung in the air like fog. Finally, Vivian whispered, do you hate us? I looked at her, the woman who'd built her world on appearances, who'd sacrificed her soul for status. No, I said simply. Hate would mean you still have power over me. You're just strangers who happen to raise me. Sterling's shoulders sagged. I'd never seen him look so small. "You'll regret this," he muttered, heading for the door. "No," I replied. I already regretted everything else. As the door closed behind them, I exhaled. The room felt lighter. For the first time, I wasn't the forgotten son or the family embarrassment. I was free. A week later, I visited the Newark warehouse, the same one where I used to work. The same one where I'd been called the smart one wasting his potential. This time, I wasn't wearing a stained work shirt. I wore a tailored navy suit, Raphael's cufflinks on my wrists. When I stepped inside, the smell of oil and sawdust hit me like nostalgia. And there he was, Quentin, standing on the loading dock, sweat dripping down his temples, calluses starting to form on his soft hands. He looked up and froze. "You knew, didn't you?" he said, voice cracking. "This whole time, you knew you'd win in the end." I shook my head. "No, Quentin. I didn't know I'd win. I just knew I'd survive." He let out a breath, sitting down on a crate. "They're falling apart, you know. Mom barely leaves her room. Dad's different." "I know," I said quietly. He stared at his hands. "Maybe it's my turn to learn what you did." "Maybe it is." I handed him a bottle of water. "Every insult they threw at me made me stronger. Maybe yours will do the same." For the first time, he looked at me not like a rival, but like a brother. That night, back in Miami, I sat in my office long after sunset. The city lights shimmered off the bay like constellations reflected in water. On my desk sat the folder that had started it all, Raphael's will, the DNA test, the letter. I opened the letter again, reading the words I'd memorized. "My son, I watched you become the man I hoped you'd be, not because of privilege, but in spite of it. Blood doesn't make family, but it does make heirs. Welcome home. Your father, Raphael Castellano." I read that last line again and again. Welcome home. For 28 years, I'd been searching for those words. 6 months later, Pierce Shipping was unrecognizable. Not from collapse, not yet, but from humility. Grant had kept his end of the deal. He worked the docks every morning, punching a clock at 6 a.m., shoulder to shoulder with men who'd never seen the inside of a boardroom. He looked older. Stronger. Less polished, more human. Every week, Nadira sent me reports from our legal division, updating me on the contract status. I hadn't pulled them, not yet. Watching them rebuild themselves from ashes was more satisfying than cutting them off completely. The irony wasn't lost on me. The brother who'd once been worshipped for doing nothing now worked to survive. And the son who'd been labeled useless ran an empire worth billions. One morning, I got a call from Quentin. "Hey," he said, his voice weary but honest. "You were right. About everything." "About what?" I asked, sipping my coffee as I looked out at the Miami harbor. "That I didn't know anything," he said. "That money makes you forget what work feels like. I used to think you were bitter. But now I get it. You were just awake before the rest of us." I smiled quietly. "Maybe that's all any of us are, just waiting to wake up." He chuckled. "They don't talk to me much now. Mom barely looks at me. Dad's trying to sell his watch collection." "Good," I said softly. "Let them learn value the way we had to." He hesitated. "I know we'll never be close, Landon. But I want you to know. I'm proud of you." That one sentence, coming from the brother who had everything, meant more than any fortune ever could. That evening, I attended the first Castellano Foundation Gala, an event created to honor my father's memory and provide scholarships for trade education, antique restoration, ship maintenance, mechanical training, the kind of real work that built the world. As I stood on the stage in front of hundreds of people, I held Raphael's letter in my jacket pocket. When I first opened this folder, I thought it contained money. But what it really held was truth, and truth is worth more than any inheritance. My father didn't give me wealth. He gave me something rarer. He gave me purpose. He taught me that sometimes, the people who throw you away are just clearing space for the people who are meant to find you. Applause filled the hall, but I barely heard it. For the first time, I wasn't speaking for approval. I was speaking because the words were mine. After the event, I drove to the Edgewater Cemetery, where Raphael Castellano was buried overlooking the bay. The city lights reflected off the water like a painting. I set down a bouquet of white lilies and a small folded letter. Inside, I'd written 5 words that had lived in my chest since the day I opened that folder. "Thank you for finding me." The wind caught the paper and carried it gently toward the ocean. I looked up at the night sky, at the ships gliding silently across the horizon, and smiled. The forgotten son had become the legacy. The outcast had become the heir. The lie had become the lesson. And for the first time in my life, I understood something simple. The best revenge isn't winning. It's becoming everything they swore you never could be. When I returned to my office, I placed the original folder, The one Nadira gave me at Harvard, in a glass display case on my desk. Every morning, before I start my day, I read Raphael's words again. Welcome home, my real son. Those 5 words built me. Not the $400 million. Not the empire. Just that one truth, that somewhere, someone saw my worth when everyone else saw waste. Because sometimes the family that throws you away isn't your ending. They're just the preface to your real story. And mine? Mine was just beginning. Would you have done the same if your entire life turned out to be a lie? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about betrayal, redemption, and the quiet kind of revenge that changes everything.